Eat like a bird. In today's challenge, you are going to use different bird beaks to collect food. Materials that you'll need for Eat Like a Bird are, you're going to need your iPad timer, so find the clock app on your iPad. You're going to need the bird beak stomach, it's the larger cup. You're going to need your tools, your bird beak tools, which are tweezers to represent a pinching type beak. You're going to need your pipette, which is a fancy word for an eyedropper. If yours comes in a kind of a sleeve, just go ahead and peel that sleeve back and take out the pipette. You can throw this part away. You're going to need your spoon, which is, for this pipette is going to be a sucking mouth part, kind of like what hummingbirds have. Then you're going to need your scooping beak, like a pelican, which is your spoon. We're going to need our food sources. So you have a bag of yarn, which are going to represent worms. You have a bag of rice, which is going to represent insects. You have a bag of bird seeds, so those represent seeds. When you're done with this activity, you can actually take this outside and it'll be a nice little treat for those birds outside that are foraging for food during the winter. You can also, and you have your cup that you're going to fill halfway up with water, and this is going to represent the nectar in a flower. Go ahead and find your science journal, turn to page 20, and find all of these materials in your supply kit. So hit pause and come back when you're ready. All right, Eat Like a Bird. Let's talk about the rules. So once you found all your food, your tools, you have your iPad, you have your stomach, and you have your science journal, and you're on page 20, let's talk about the rules. So there are rules in how your bird beak is going to collect the different food. Rule number 1, only the beak can touch the food. So if you're having a hard time picking something up, it's just the beak that can touch the food. Birds don't have hands they have claws, but we're just looking at bird beaks. We're not looking at their claws or their claws as a tool. So you can only use your tool. So you can't use your hands to pick up the food. You can only use your tool to pick up the food. Rule number 2, you can only collect one piece at a time. So what that looks like is when I take out my yarn and I use my tweezers to pick them up, I can't say, oops, I picked them all up. I can only pick one at a time. And then I'm going to put that food into my stomach one at a time. If I were to pick up 2 at a time or more and then try to put that into my stomach, I choke. So you can only pick up one piece of food at a time. So one yarn at a time, one grain of rice at a time, one seed at a time, or one drop of water at a time. Okay? The next rule is each piece of food must be placed in your stomach. So if you're going real fast and some falls out and doesn't go into your stomach, that doesn't count as food that made it into the stomach. So if it falls out of the cup, it didn't make it into the stomach, and you can't count it at the end of the round. All right? So if you drop your food, you can use your beak tool to pick up your food and put it back in your stomach, but the food doesn't count unless it's in your stomach. Okay, so once you have all your supplies, you filled your cup halfway filled with water, and you have all of your food, your tools, and your iPad ready to go on the clock. We're going to talk about what each round will look like. Okay, round 1. I have my timer set to 15 seconds. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my tweezers. The tweezers is the first tool that I'm going to use, and I have my cup ready to go. So I'm going to take your tweezer out, set your iPad timer to 15 seconds, use the tweezers to collect as many worms or yarn as you can in 15 seconds. And then I'm going to record my data below. So watch what I'm going to do, and then you're going to hit pause, and you're going to do the same thing. All right, on your marks, get set, go. 15 seconds. Remember, I can only do one at a time. Oh, that one's hard to get. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, okay. So I have 5 yarn pieces. I'm going to hit stop on my timer. I'm going to write that time down onto my science journal underneath where it says tweezers, yarn, number collected, I have 5, and then I'm going to move over to my rice. I'm going to hit start on my timer, and I'm going to collect as many grains of rice as I can. In 15 seconds. Okay, I have 6. All right, so I'm going to write that down underneath tweezers, rice, number collected. I'm going to write 6. Pour that back in there. Now I'm going to do the bird seed. Here I go. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of bird seed. I'm going to write that down underneath bird beak seeds. Okay, and now I'm going to try to get some drops of water. All right, I'm going to hit 15 seconds, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so I'm going to put 6 drops of water underneath tweezers. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my pipette, and I'm going to set my timer again and try to pick up as many with my pipette of the worms, the rice, the bird seeds, and the water and the nectar or the water, and get them into my stomach, just like I did with the tweezers. And then I'm going to use my next tool. 15 seconds trying to pick up yarn or worms. 15 seconds trying to pick up, remember, only one at a time. 15 seconds trying to pick up rice or insects. And then 15 seconds trying to pick up one at a time birdseed. And then 15 seconds of water drops at a time. You might, when you analyze this, so that was too much. I don't want to choke. One at a time. You might want to look at, when you're done with the water, compare the amount of nectar or water. Who was able to get the most amount of nectar or water? Was it the tweezers, the scooper, or the pipette? So when you're doing your pipette, 1 drop at a time, right? So that's 1 drop at a time, right? Okay, when you're done with that, go ahead and hit pause, because the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to analyze all of your data that's on your data table and answer the questions that are on page 21 and 22 in your science journal. So now let's turn to the next page in your science journal after the data table. So on page 22, summary questions. Look at your data on page 21. Which type of beak was most successful in eating? So who had the largest numbers in eating the worms or the yarn, the rice or the insects, the seeds or the seeds and berries, or the water, which represented the nectar? Go ahead and write the name of the beak. Was it the tweezers? Was it the spoon? Or was it the pipette? Next, question number 2. Look at your data. Which type of beak was least successful in eating? That means it did not get a lot of. So who got the least amount of worms? Which beak got the least amount of insects, the least amount of seeds and berries, and which one got the least amount of nectar from flowers? Question number 3. Did any of the beaks work well with multiple types of food? Explain why you think this. So look at your data table and analyze your data. Was there any type of beak that seemed to get a lot of food regardless of the type of food? Okay, and question number 4. In this unit, we have learned an adaptation is a characteristic of a living thing that helps it live and survive in its environment. When an environment changes dramatically, some animals adapt, others move to a new location, and some will die. Keeping this in mind, what would happen to the birds with the 3 different beaks if the only food on an island were flowering plants or nectar. So what would happen to the birds with a tweezer, the birds that had a pipet-like beak, and the birds with a spoon-like beak? Would they adapt? Would they move to a new island? Or would they die? Go ahead and write your answers for question number 4 on page 22 of your science journal.